Welcome to our Portuguese Table podcast. I'm Maria Lawton, the Azorian Green Bean.
And I'm Angela Simoes, and we're just two chicks dishing about Portuguese food, culture, and what it means to be Portuguese.
So grab a glass of vinho or un copo de café and join us as we talk about our favorite foods, reminisce about growing up Portuguese,
and interview some of our community's most successful chefs and food writers.
So sit down at our Portuguese table.
Welcome, everybody, to another episode of Our Portuguese Table. Hello, Maria.
Hello, Angela. How are you, honey?
I am doing well. We're recording this on a Monday, so I'm doing well for a Monday. Not too crazy.
Mondays are hard, but we have a great show lined up for everyone today. Yeah. Very, very excited.
Yeah, it's our first government official.
It is. It is. We've had a whole bunch of chefs and we've had a whole bunch of bloggers, Portuguese bloggers. But you're right. This is the first time we've had someone in being. Yeah, that's a wonderful thing.
So everybody, welcome Nuno Mathias, who is the Consul General of Portugal in San Francisco. Welcome, Nuno.
Welcome. Thank you for having me.
So some of you might be wondering, why would you have a Consul General on a show where you're supposed to talk about food? And I will say I had suggested this because Nuno is one of my favorite people in the community. He has been a phenomenal Consul General, and I think anybody that knows him or is here in California will agree with me hands down. And he's just been so active in the community, opens his residence for us to host events and mixers and dinners and things like that. And he's spearheaded a lot of new events and has brought a film festival to San Francisco, Portuguese Film Festival to San Francisco. And so he's just done so many wonderful things that it's, wanted to raise his profile a little bit through our podcast. But then also he's kind of a, foodie a little bit, and he likes to spread the word about Portuguese food in San Francisco, and has had some interesting events around Portuguese wine and things like that. So that's kind of why. And then we get to hear a little bit about the Consul General and what his favorite foods are and things like that.
Absolutely. I think this is great. And for the simple fact that this is for people who, as we always say, for the Portuguese, no matter where they live, and it's all about being proud and loving being Portuguese. So what better way than to have the Consulate of Portugal being on? I think that's great. And it sounds amazing, all the things that Nuno has done. So that's a wonderful thing. That is a wonderful thing. I'm very lucky too here. We have a Consulate of Portugal in New Bedford, which is Pedro Caneiro. And we're also very lucky. It seems like right now at this time, both ends of the spectrum, on one side of the West Coast and one side on the East Coast, we've got some really good consulates going on right now, which we're very, very happy, very blessed about.
Yeah, and I think we talked about trying to get him on as a guest as well.
We are. I think we are trying to. For that same thing, we wanted to see the difference also of the Portuguese in San Francisco versus the Portuguese in, or say in the West Coast versus, here in the East Coast. And I doubt there'll be any difference. I doubt there'll be any difference. And it's all about promoting being Portuguese, which is a wonderful thing.
Right. So Nuno, I think we should start just hearing a little bit about yourself and how you became the Consul General in San Francisco, because, we have consuls that come through every 4 years, and I don't know that the community ever really gets to know them as people, and how did you get to where you are, and, what are your interests and things like that. So what's your path?
What's your story? Yeah. What's your story?
Well, first and foremost, thank you very much for having me. Thank you for the very kind words you had about me. I'm not sure if they're entirely true, but
don't be modest.
Well, I mean, consul is a position, and my career is a diplomat. So I've joined the Portuguese Foreign Service some 23 years ago. and this is how you become a consul general. You're a career diplomat, at least for Portugal. And so I was fortunate enough to have been placed and posted in a few very interesting posts, previously in the U.S. actually, and I was not actually planning on San Francisco. It came by accident. At the time, my predecessor had only been here for a short few years, and so there was no indication that the post would be vacant. That changed, and of course, at the time I was looking for a new post, and the fact that I'm married to an American citizen prompted me to look in the U.S. and what were available in the U.S. So when San Francisco became available, there was no hesitation, and I made my candidature for the post. So, and I was very lucky to be assigned this post.
Mm-hmm. And so and so you were in Washington D.C. before, right? You mentioned another post in the U.S.
Yes, I mean I started very briefly with short periods at the UN within our General Assembly at our UN mission in New York. So that gave me a little bit of the flair of New York and the United States. But my very first assignment was Washington D.C. back in the mid to late 90s. President Clinton was in office at the time, and I was posted there for 5 years, and that's where I met my wife, and our first child was born. So yes, a very formative post. I mean, Washington is the capital, is a very global city, very important city in terms of foreign policy, and so fascinating post for someone who had just joined the Foreign Service.
So what have you liked most about San Francisco so far?
Well, I mean, the city has a very distinctive character, not because of its neighborhoods, its Victorian-style houses. I mean, ultimately, if you're familiar with the Tony Bennett's 1961, I think, or 60 song about San Francisco, "I Left My Heart in San Francisco," that will give you an idea of the loveliness and the uniqueness of San Francisco. And so, yes, it's a mix of many things, and it has to do a lot also with the connections that San Francisco has with its much older city, Lisbon.
Yes.
Same light, same hills, same trams, the morning fog, the bridge, even the earthquakes. So,
yeah, you're right.
Yeah, so both cities are like major ports for their economies. And so we like to call ourselves the West Coast of Europe because we sit at the entry point geographically at the entry point of Europe. And so we are the West Coast of Europe, like San Francisco is the West Coast of the United States.
Mm-hmm.
And we're not just geographically comparable, not only geographically West Coast, but also comparable in terms of our economies and in terms of our Portugal became a hub for technology, for entrepreneurship. So much so has San Francisco and Silicon Valley is a flagship for that economy.
Right.
So yeah, we like all of that mix has made or makes for me San Francisco a very unique post to be. It's out in many directions. It's not just a consular office. It is a consular office with a very large input in terms of economic and commercial issues, but also in the areas of culture and the teaching of Portuguese. And we're surrounded by the top universities of the country, Stanford, Berkeley. And so that makes it also even more fascinating to be posted here.
Sure. I think part of being a counselor is the outreach that is done within your office. And with that outreach, meaning educating and making sure that the community knows about the Portuguese as they are, and on our history, as well as our language, as well as our music, as well as all of the other components that come together. And it's definitely that outreach, and I see it here, and I would assume you're doing it the same thing there, and in promoting what is Portuguese. But I also know, and I've mentioned this to Angela, and she corrected me. I always thought that the people who immigrated into the West Coast, a lot of them being Portuguese, immigrated into San Francisco. And at one point, there was a very large community of Portuguese people there. Now we're looking at, third, fourth, generation. But do you still find it a larger community there that are the ancestors of those that came?
In San Francisco nowadays, what you have is a younger community, mostly people connected to the startup scene, came here maybe some 10, 15 years ago, came here for postdocs. So people graduated from either from Portuguese universities or American universities that are here, in the entrepreneurship and startup scenes. The old generation, the ancestors of the early Portuguese immigration, unfortunately, you don't see them anymore. They have long moved to the other parts of the state, mostly the Central Valley. You can still find some ranches and some dairy farms in Marin County and along the coast of California that still carry the Portuguese name, and still are within Portuguese families, but very few. Nowadays, you will find immigration mostly in Central Valley and towards the south, and San Diego, Los Angeles. In the Bay Area, of course, San Jose and the East Bay still have a lot of Portuguese.
Yes.
But yeah, it's very scattered nowadays. And San Francisco today is more of a younger people kind of scenery for Portuguese.
Now, I'm going to ask you a personal question. Where were you born?
I was born in Lisbon.
You were born in Lisbon. And when you were young, how many siblings? Are you the only child? Do you have many siblings?
I have one sibling, a younger brother.
You have a brother. Okay. And was your mom a great cook? Did you enjoy what she made, or your grandmother, or anything like that? Well, I'm going right to food right here, right now. I'm going into the food questions. Was she a great cook?
She was a good cook. She was a good cook. The thing about, when you're young, when I was a child, I was not my brother either. We were not big eaters, and like most kids, I think we were trying to find excuses not to eat, because either it looks different or it tastes or smells funny. So not big memories. But I have, in terms of food, no, not. I mean, except in the dessert realm.
Okay.
Yes, the dessert. Kids they love sweets. So yes, in the desserts, my mother excelled in desserts. She made a lot of different cake. That it's still a good cake. Is what we call bolo bolacha, which is kind of a cookies cake.
Yes.
It's a typical Portuguese cake that is made out of bolacha Maria, which is a Portuguese cookies, and has a lot of kind of a coffee cream to eat. Yes, and so it's very difficult to make, because you have to dip every cookie one at a time in coffee and then layer it with some sort of a coffee cream. So it takes a very long time to make it, but it's very, very good. So that's probably one of my child memories that is still very present. I love that cake.
Now, you said you were married to a U.S. citizen, and I'm glad to see that someone else married a U.S. citizen, because Angela always gives me a hard time because I married an English Irishman, and she married a Portuguese man, so she always gives me a hard time. But so I'm very glad to hear that you did. Now, does she cook Portuguese?
No, we don't cook that much. I mean, we cook like easy food. We don't do elaborate food.
You don't have a whole lot of time to cook, really.
Yes, we don't
You're
have a lot of time to cook, and so
Right.
it's more of, yeah, I mean, homemade cooking, nothing elaborate, nothing too elaborate.
Okay. See, because one of the things we talk about here is how important it is to pass on things to the next generation, and we can't lose that. And yes, the language is important, our music, but our culinary is right up there too. And we are, our Portuguese table here for our podcast, and everything surrounds that table. So at that table, we always try to make sure that we're passing it on. Now, you said you have a child, right? You have children?
Yeah, we have two boys, two
All right.
young boys.
So are you passing that on to them?
Yes, mostly when we go to Portugal, there's more options there. But yes, mostly, fish. Try to make them fish. That's for me, one of my top preferred foods, and recipes around fish.
I see.
But again, that they are experiencing what I was when I was a child, so they are picky with their food, and
they're picky like their dad.
Yes, not too adventurous, so we have to keep it simple.
Is your wife picky too, or is she adventurous?
No, she's very adventurous. No, we eat everything. We both eat everything. So no.
Yeah.
No, I came to eat almost everything. Very little exceptions.
Because we always talk about what your favorite dish and the memory behind it, but your favorite dish, you're saying, is your mom's bolacha, the cake, o bolo de bolacha. That is your favorite.
Yeah.
Now, what's your least favorite?
Well, I mean, favorite in terms of, main course. If you go for a Portuguese favorite dish, I would have to go for ameijoas ao bolhão pato, the Portuguese clams, cooked clams with the white wine and the cilantro.
The coriander and the cilantro,
yeah. I love that. And I mean, the codfish, I love the codfish, especially the codfish with broa and coentros.
Oh, the broa! I love the one with the broa too.
That's a tough one to make. I did a couple times, and it's very hard to make because it's very hard to find broa. That's an ingredient that is not easy to find here in the U.S.
At least in California.
It's not.
I was going to say it's easy for us here in the East Coast.
Okay. Well, you have to send me some.
Okay. I will do that.
I love it.
I will do that. Angela will.
Yeah, but the things that I can't really get I cannot really think about it, like those, pig feet and tripe and brains, all those organs that I have some difficulty. I will eat the liver. I love liver.
Me too.
And other parts, but not those. Not those. I really have some heart trouble.
Yeah, even though they tell me they've cleaned it, they've done this to it, I can't eat tripe. I can't do it either. But I do liver. My liver with onions, it has to be sliced very thin, and then it has to be marinated and cooked in wine. It's got to be perfect. And but my husband, I can't make that at home if he's home. The smell is too overpowering for him.
Okay, I've never cooked liver, so I don't know how bad the smell is. But
the smell is, it does overtake you. But that's okay.
Good to know. Good to know.
It's good to know.
The brains and the tripas and stuff like that. I think, most people we talk to say that they can't eat it. Even some chefs we've interviewed on the show, like dobrada is the one thing that they will not eat. And I think a lot of it is because back in the day, you almost had to eat that because you really, back then they utilized every part of the animal.
Exactly. From snout to tail.
Yeah, right. And now that's not so much of a problem. You can be a little more picky with which parts you eat and don't eat, right? So I think it's the foodies, right, that eat all the special stuff, I would say.
Absolutely.
So,
now, how often do you go back to Portugal?
I try to go at least once a year.
You do. And family is still there?
Yes, my parents are still there. Yes.
Oh, they are. Oh, that's a blessing. That
Yes,
is a
it is.
blessing.
So when you go back to Lisbon, do you have a favorite restaurant that you go to, or a place where you like to eat? Like every year, you look forward to going back and having this at this restaurant.
Yes, yes, yes. They have a couple restaurants. Again, I look for restaurants that offer very fresh. It has to be around fish or seafood.
Mhm.
You
It's
are
well
absolutely
done.
right.
It's just amazing. So I go for that. That's my main thing. And of course, I mean, if I have the option of trying, local foods that I don't get to eat at home, yeah, I go for it.
Mm. Now, have you been to the Azores?
No, I have not.
You haven't?
No,
Oh, that's where I'm
my
from.
American wife has though.
Oh, she's a smart woman. I already love her.
Just broke Maria's heart.
I know. Oh my God. No, you need to see the Azores too. It
Yeah, I know.
is. You do. You absolutely do. In Saint Michael, of course, that's where I'm from. So that's close to my heart. But the whole islands
Okay.
are just beautiful. So
So I actually could you share the names of the restaurants that you like, because we're going in the end of September, and so I want to go eat where the consul eats.
that's right. You're going for a month, aren't you?
Yeah, we are. We may have to record an episode while I'm there, and then I can.
Oh, I love it. I love that.
Well, I mean, my hometown is Cascais, so I always go to a couple places in Cascais. One of them is Luzmar. It's really downtown. It's a classic Portuguese, mariscaria, where you have seafood and
Mhm.
fish. The other one that I like a lot is Mar do Inferno, and that's close to the Boca do Inferno, which is
Which
within
is
Cascais, a little
gorgeous.
bit
Oh,
outside,
right.
and so
Okay.
that's probably one of the top best fish restaurants. And yeah, those are the in Cascais, and then Lisbon. I mean, nowadays you have a choice, and I'm a little bit outdated because I haven't experienced more. Recently, I went to Cevicheria, which is actually almost you could almost say it's a sister restaurant to Adega here in San Jose, because the chef here in San Jose, his brother is the host at Cevicheria, and the chef at Cevicheria in Lisbon is the brother of Antonio Martins, who actually made the design of the restaurant here in San Jose. Antonio Martins is
Oh,
a
wow. I didn't
famous
know.
Portuguese designer who lives here in San Francisco for the last 15 years, and his brother is the chef of Cevicheria, and he has also another new restaurant called Utalho in Lisbon. So funny little connections between the two cities already,
Wow.
and the cookings. But there's many restaurants that are very good. You have O Cantinho do Avilés. José Avilés is of course one of our top chefs right now, and many little restaurants in Lisbon. One of them, a 2-star Michelin restaurant, Café do Chiado. Sorry, no, it's not Café do Chiado. My mistake is Bel Canto.
Right.
Bel Canto is a 2-star restaurant by José Avilés, and many others, smaller restaurants, all fantastic. So definitely worth being explored. And there's other ones, more traditional that have been around longer, that are very, very good. A Travessa is one of my favorites. Also, I haven't been there in a long time, but that's a very good restaurant. And all of them with a lot of character, amazing food, great locations, historic locations. So, yeah, not only a feast for the stomach, for the feast for the eyes, a feast for everything, So that's the beauty of Lisbon. It
Right.
gives you so much.
And the thing is I think the world is, how can I explain it? For a little part of how small Portugal is, there are so many of us, and Portugal really is all over the world. And by having its citizens spread out everywhere. And I see this almost every day when I have people sending me messages, whether they're in Indonesia or if they're in Japan or if they're in Australia or if they're in wherever they may be, looking for a certain recipe that their mom made or having a question. I mean, we're just everywhere. And the other day I read something on there is a DNA study or a chromosome study that is the study is coming out and they're still doing more on it, but it looks like the Iberian Peninsula and the Lusitano, whatever type of gene that Portuguese have, or some Portuguese have, it might be the oldest gene known.
What?
And it's older than any of the other Mediterranean cities or any of the, it is, they're studying it and it looks like there is a gene there that is one of the oldest and it belongs to Portugal.
Wow, that's crazy.
And I read that and I went, but of course, because it makes sense. We have been around for so long. We have, at one point, the world was ours. So we've had all these ingredients and our hands on these ingredients long before so many others had their hands on it. And for all of that we've accomplished, somehow we don't talk about it, or it's almost like a well-kept secret of how great we are.
Marketing has always been our problem.
Yes, and I think now is the time, and people are discovering more and more of Portugal, and I'm so happy that they are, because it blows my mind. It just blows my mind of all the things that how talented we are. And I know that we're talking about ourselves here, but we're really a great group of people. We really are.
We are, yes, we are. And maybe to follow up on what you were saying, I wanted just to call the attention of your listeners that soon enough, actually in a couple of weeks, it will be available on iTunes. There's going to be a new movie. It's a documentary about port wine. It was made out here in Sausalito, and directed by British former BBC documentarist David Cannard, and a French wine connoisseur, Martin Saunier. And the movie will be out September 6th on iTunes. It's called A Year in Port. And the reason why I'm mentioning this is because the movie has just won its first, it was just issued this past weekend on the Rhode Island International Film Festival. And the movie just got a first prize at the Rhode Island Film Festival. And so this is going to be a great way to showcase our cultural, because the movie is absolutely stunning, stunning in the images of the Douro Valley, amazing in terms of the whole history of port wine, which in itself is fantastic.
Yeah.
And so it's going to be a great piece of conversation, and I would probably suggest a podcast only dedicated to this film later on. Who knows? Maybe with one of the filmmakers themselves.
That would be that's a great idea.
Part of that, but it just won this past weekend, so I'm still very thrilled with the prize that the movie got, and the movie is going to officially be launched in New York on September 19th, and then in other places, and it's going to be on iTunes on September 6th. So look out for A Year in Port. It's
wow,
great showcase of Portuguese cultural and Portuguese, probably one of the most extraordinary wines from the oldest wine region in the world, the oldest demarcated wine region in the world. So
yeah, we can definitely.
Go ahead.
Yeah. I was just saying, include the link to that documentary in our show notes, so everybody knows where to go download it and where to find it.
Yeah, I'll send it to you.
Perfect. So this is just one example of one of the things that Nuno, you have been promoting, and how you do such a good job of raising awareness of different things that come through, whether it's a documentary, whether it's an event, whether it's a film festival. There's so many things that I feel like you've helped to put together or helped promote, or even brought together, like held events in the consulate that where you invite non-Portuguese people to learn about Portuguese wine and the culture and things like that. Tell us a little, can you just talk a little bit about like how you come up, like do those things and why you do those things and where you get your ideas? And because from my perspective, you've been the most active consul in that area. And so what's your motivation to do all that?
Well, I guess the love of my country, that would definitely come first. And that's why I chose this profession. When you're a diplomat, you're basically representing your country, and you're doing it 24/7. You know, there's not a time when you switch off, and you're always representing your country, always striving for that. That's promotion, and in engaging locally. I mean, that's what I'm paid for. I'm paid for, of course, to connect with my fellow citizens and help them, in consular affairs and help them with their documentation. But I'm also paid to showcase my country and to promote my country, and that's what I do. I was very fortunate to have met the people that were behind this movie, The Year in Port. Met them shortly after my arrival and made a connection, and they immediately invited me to help edit the movie. At the time, the movie was still being edited, and so I was part of that project in the very early stage of it. And so I'm very happy that I was able to be, connected with what is, already, you can see by the prize it won, what will be a great tool to put Portugal. I mean, previous movies have, these people have already done two previous movies, one about Burgundy called A Year in Burgundy and the other one called A Year in Champagne. And those two
I've seen the movie A Year in Burgundy.
And it had an amazing impact. And so this is a great opportunity that we have. It's a trilogy. There's not going to be any more of those movies. It's going to be 3 movies.
Wow.
So 2 French wines and 1 port wine. So it puts us, really at the top of the wines in the world. I mean, not that we needed the movie to be there, but it's a way of acknowledging. And this movie, it's going to be it's going to be available on airlines. It's going to be available on iTunes, many platforms. So it will be seen by many people, and it will be an amazing tool to promote tourism in Portugal. So I was very fortunate to be involved in that initial editing of that movie, and immediately when I saw it, I realized it was an incredible asset to be part of that.
Right.
But I mean, there's many other things, that again, I have to. That's part of my job. I have to mingle outside of, and take any advantage to promote Portugal. And that's why when I arrived here, I realized that I needed to make that extra step in engaging those who I meet. I decided to be a little more adventurous and to do a little bit what is done here in Silicon Valley, to be disruptive in the way that I am here. And I've tried to be as disruptive as possible.
Oh, I
and
love that.
One of the very, very easy things that I did was basically to have on my business card an advertisement on the other side. It's very unlikely you will find a diplomat with a business card that has some sort of a logo or a catchy phrase on the other side of the card. Mm-hmm. And that's what I did. I put it, Portugal, Europe's West Coast. That is what I have on the back of my card. And you cannot imagine how many people, when you present your business card, immediately ask you, "Oh, really? Oh, tell me about it." So it's a great
conversation
way to opener, break the ice, and start talking about. Basically, I just want an opportunity to talk about Portugal in any way possible and shape. So this is the disruptiveness element that you have to play with the rules of the game. You are here in a city that is tremendously original, tremendously, open to diversity, and you have to be part of that diversity. You have to play with the rules of the game. And that's also why we launched this year an app of the consulate. We're one of the very few Portuguese consulates in the world that has an application. And that was the purpose, was also to be disruptive, to be on the forefront of technology. I mean, if we are the consulate that is within Silicon Valley, we have to be up to par with the technologies that Silicon Valley offers. And why I wanted to launch this application, to reach out especially to the younger generation that basically is connected 24/7 to their smartphone, to their, and I wanted to be on that platform as well, so that people can connect easily to the consulate, and the consulate can connect to them via notifications also easily. So these are some of the challenges and some of the ways that I have approaches those challenges.
Wow, I love it.
Yeah.
And you said you're the only consulate to have an app?
I'm not the only one. I'm one of the very few.
Okay.
I'm only aware of another one outside of the United States.
Wow.
But maybe there's more. I don't know. I doubt it, though. My feeling is that there's only two of us.
Wow. That's amazing.
Also, the challenge too is that you're trying to do so much, and I think what a lot of people don't realize is that the budgets aren't huge that you have to deal with, right? So you have to be very creative and rely on.
Yes, I mean, all of these things have to be budget neutral. I cannot. This is important to stress out. I mean, this application costs money because it's not cheap, as you can imagine. And so it was part of a fundraising event, and it was basically paid by a civic platform. It was not paid by the consulate. But it was paid by a civic platform that was created here in California called Dar Voz a California, Give a Voice to California. It was Nelson Ponta Garça, who was elected the Portuguese Conselheiro das Comunidades, who basically created that platform, and he saw the value of giving an app to the consulate in order to give a greater voice to the Portuguese community in California and to reach out to the younger generations. So yes, some creativity and disruptiveness to come up with these projects and be budget neutral. That's the whole point.
I like the terminology of disruptive. I do.
Yeah, well, if you're here in Silicon Valley, it's very common to hear it. But I agree with you. It's not something you hear outside of Silicon Valley. Yes, that's the whole concept behind of Silicon Valley, is to be disruptive in terms of what they create, in terms of their being innovative in a very disruptive way.
And I love the idea of that, because you're right. What we're doing needs to be available, especially to the next generation. We don't want to lose them. We assimilate very well. That's one thing I can say for the Portuguese, and I can say this in regards to here in the East Coast. I immigrated in the 60s, and everyone assimilated very easily. And the Portuguese are not a very loud community. We tend to keep to our own, but everyone kind of assimilated very quickly into the American way. And what scares me now is that my children, they know who they are, and in passing it on to them. But I want to see my grandchildren also be doing the same thing and knowing where they come from and having that part of it and so forth on. And I'm just afraid of that getting lost in generations. And by keeping up with it, or keeping with the new generation, I think that's the way to go. I think that makes perfect sense.
Well, and this podcast is a perfect example. I mean, you're already using a very, innovative means of communication. I mean, a podcast in itself, implies that people know how to download and listen to these podcasts.
Right.
So you're already playing with the technology of the future, and
Yes.
That's wonderful. And then who knows? I mean, again, applications I think are a wonderful tool, and so why not create or help create apps that are food related, Portuguese food related, with easy recipes or easy contents that will appeal to the younger generation. And so yeah, we should use those platforms. The platforms are available to us, it's up to us to use them the best way we can to challenge and connect with the newer generation and to reconnect with them.
Well, Angela, I think we've got a job to do next, because it's funny when Angela and I, when we met and we started talking, and we felt very similar about a majority of everything, which is kind of scary. And when this came about in us doing this, it was a no-brainer for us because it didn't exist. And also being in, whether you live in Canada or whether you live out in the United States or anywhere in the world, by just being Portuguese. So we have people in Bermuda that are listening to this. We have people in Australia that are listening to this. And it's just all the Portuguese everywhere. And sometimes it's funny how there are days that when we do the podcast that Angela and I will say some things in Portuguese, and we'll get notice from someone saying, "Oh my God, I haven't heard, someone say those words or talk about this memory or this thing. It brought me back to my," and it's just so important just to keep it going. We have to keep spreading it. We have to keep talking about it. So I like the app idea with food recipes, Angela. What do you think?
That's a phenomenal idea. Thanks for the tip.
I think
You're welcome.
Yeah, because Angela and I are always like thinking of different things that we need to do to keep promoting, and that's it.
In another thing I forgot to say is that the app of the consulate was an app made in Portugal, made in the Azores.
Really?
So we're not only promoting the content, but we're promoting the engineers behind it, and we're very proud that our app is made in Portugal. It's the product of Portuguese company. So that also is I think a good way of promoting our country, not only just by the content, but by the platform itself.
Yes.
So we're coming up on the end here, and it's funny. What people didn't hear is I think Nuno was skeptical about, are people really do we have a whole hour of stuff to talk about? And here we are, it's almost an hour and we could probably keep going. But I did want to ask, we talked about your favorite restaurants in Lisbon, and you've been in San Francisco now for almost 4 years. Do you have any favorite spots in San Francisco?
Of course, it's difficult not to have to. I mean, San Francisco is an amazing city. Again, because of its diversity, you can basically find anything, and with incredible quality. I mean, the amount of restaurants that have Michelin stars is stunning, and at the top level. So, but I rather prefer more simple, fresh cooking. I mean, I was fortunate enough to experience some of the very high-end cuisines and invited to some of those. But if I have to make my own choice, I would go for smaller joints, so to speak, that offer, fresh, local produce, organic local produce, and simple cuisine, and there's many of them in San Francisco. And again, I try to look for fish. It's not quite the same type of fish that you'll find in Portugal, but still, it's pleasant. But yeah, I have my favorite little spots, and they're not very fancy. One of them is actually a burger place, and it's an artisan burger. It's called Rome, ROAM. Rome. There's only 2 in the city, and so they're amazing burgers. And then some small little Italian restaurants or Asian cuisine, which is of course also very good in San Francisco because of the big Asian community. So no, it's been in that regard also fascinating to be here because of the variety that you can find in the quality.
In fact, is the Rome the burger place we went to last week?
Yes, it is. Yes,
Maria, Nuno, and I had lunch last week, and when I met him at the consul, he said, "Do you want to have a burger?" And I, sure. And but it was actually a vegan burger that was actually really delicious.
Really?
Yeah, it was really, really good. So I know everyone, when they hear the word vegan, they think immediately that it's not going to taste very good, but it was delicious.
Well, yeah, because it's made out of red quinoa, So when you
Oh,
get it to the plate, it looks like you're eating red meat, and you say, "Is that really vegetarian?" And actually, it's amazing. The taste, the caramelized onions, everything is done, and everything is organic and it's fresh. So you get fresh tomatoes, fresh vegetables. I mean, it's really very good.
mm,
So it's very
sounds
unique. It's a very unique type of burger. You won't find it anywhere else.
mm. Now, I know we've been asking all different kinds of questions, and we do ask this of everyone that comes on, and that is, what does it mean to you being Portuguese?
Well, it means all we've been talking for the last hour.
But what does it mean to you being Portuguese? What does it mean to you? Personal. This is a personal thing. What does it mean to you in your heart?
Well, I don't see myself being anything else.
Yeah.
It's what I am. I feel deeply rooted in a sense of a common history, common cultural, and I lived abroad even when I was young. So, but I was fortunate enough to spend most of my youth in Portugal, and so being deeply rooted and this common sense of belonging to the same. It's a culture, it's a language, it's many things. It's non-palpable. It's a very unique sense of and very gratifying
Mm.
of being part of this community of I'm speechless.
Yeah, and it does that to us too. It does.
It,
It tugs at our hearts at sometimes. It really does.
yes,
Yeah.
it does. Yes, it does. Yes,
Yeah.
and because I'm fortunate enough to be in a place in California where there's such a large Portuguese community, and I'm fortunate enough to be able to live this Portuguese culture almost on a daily basis,
Mm.
so that I don't have this feeling of being uprooted or being, abroad.
Yeah.
I'm in constant contact with the Portuguese community and the way they preserve and promote our cultural in such an incredible way. So I'm very fortunate and I'm very thankful to be part of that community also. I consider myself also part of this community, and it has helped me tremendously to avoid this sense of being, uprooted. So
Right.
I don't really have this sense of being homesick. I feel at
Interesting.
home because I'm
Oh,
amongst those who I mean part of my culture.
That's beautiful.
that's really amazing.
Yeah.
Well, I will say again that, you have done so much for the community that I don't think any of us even want to think about what it's going to be like when you're gone. And well, I will say that through your efforts, whoever comes in next, I think so many of us will be much more open and willing to give them the benefit of the doubt of, well, Nuno was awesome. Maybe this person's going to be awesome also,
I'm
because
sure. I'm sure it will. I'm sure it
Well,
will. I
or
have no
maybe
doubt
you'll be
about it.
extended longer than 5 years. You don't know. Maybe.
One never knows. Yes.
Yes, that could happen.
everybody send letters to the Portuguese government saying Nuno has to stay.
Send it to the Foreign Service League that you want him to stay. There it is.
We're going to include the email address in the show notes so you know exactly when to send your message. But this has been awesome. Thank you so much, Nuno, for taking the time. I know you
Of
have a
course.
busy.
Of course. It was great.
It was
Thank
such a
you.
joy as always. And
Thank you for having me.
no, it was great. You rock. So thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you.
So was I right or was I right that he is like the nicest guy?
You are right. He is. He seemed
Yeah.
very sweet, and I know at the end he was saying he was speechless. He couldn't, in talking about himself and what it means to be Portuguese. And I get it. It's something that sometimes it takes us by thinking about who we are and where we come from and what we do and all of that. It's all It's all great, but he seems like a sweet man. So I can see how much you're enjoying having him as your consulate there in San Francisco.
Yeah, I mean, the man never sleeps, I don't think, because if not at an event, and he goes to all types of events. He doesn't go to like just the big fancy dinners. I mean, when there's a showing of the Portuguese soccer game at a bar in San Francisco and all these Portuguese get together, he's there with his scarf on, his cashkol, and having a beer with them.
Well, there you go. That explains the reason he said he never feels homesick.
Yeah, so really, yeah. And then if he's not at an event, he's answering emails, trying to put programs together and trying to convince, Portuguese government why they need to, pay more attention to California and then all these things like this port wine documentary that he's trying to drive awareness around. I mean, the man is just on 24 hours. So he works tirelessly and we have to say thank you to his family for sacrificing and giving him up because I think it does take away from them quite a bit. And I want them to know how much we appreciate their sacrifice and his effort as well. So,
yeah,
but he's just been such a great guy. And we've had, good consuls before, but he just is unique and kind of his efforts just really blow everybody else out of the water.
Well, look at the thing with doing the app. I mean, he's progressive.
Yep. Launched a new website.
He's progressive.
Yeah.
And there it is. I mean, he's taking something that it could have been fine to have this, diplomat there sitting on the seat, spending his time because, you have so many years to be someplace and you don't have to make a difference. You don't have to make any changes. You can do same old because that's, but he didn't. And there's the difference. And that's who you want. You want someone being like that because that's the only way we're going to progress.
Exactly. We have to change with the times, right?
Exactly.
Yeah.
So that was a good one. That was really good. That was great to talk to him.
Well, I hope our listeners enjoyed it as much as we enjoyed talking to him.
Yes. And speaking of our listeners, thank you for listening. We appreciate all your positive messages and notes. And I know it means a lot to me, and I know it means a lot to you, Angela. So with that, we are sending you all hugs and kisses. Thank you.
And if you haven't subscribed yet, what are you waiting for? Subscribe on iTunes, on SoundCloud. Have you shared this with your parents? Have you shared this with your family? What are you waiting for?
What are you waiting for? Let's press.
Please share. And we appreciate every like and share, and especially if you have time to write a short review on iTunes, that would be phenomenal. But we just, we, like Maria said, we appreciate the comments and hope you enjoy it.
Yes.
So until next time, Maria.
Até a próxima, querida.
Até a próxima.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Thanks again for listening to our Portuguese Table podcast.
If you haven't subscribed yet, you can do so on SoundCloud or iTunes.
And all episodes can be found on our website at www.ourportuguesetable.com.
You can also reach us at feedback@ourportuguesetable.com with comments, questions, or suggestions.
Até a próxima!